Super Mario Galaxy is everywhere right now. From the Super Mario Galaxy movie becoming a smash hit, to Super Mario Galaxy 2 releasing on Switch for the first time, it's truly Mario Galaxy fever out here. But did you know that Super Mario Galaxy 2 wasn't supposed to be a sequel? In fact, the game started out as an expansion pack for the first one called Super Mario Galaxy 1.5. Today I'm going to show you a different side to this beloved sequel, from scrapped story elements to the unused Bode Mario power-up that's still hidden deep in the files of the game. We're going to see all of that and so much more. So join me on this journey through the stars and get ready for a jam-packed episode of Beta64 all about Super Mario Galaxy 2. But real quick, if you've been enjoying Beta64 and you want to help keep these videos coming, I do have a Patreon. It's like a secondary channel with new exclusive uploads every week. We've got behind the scenes stuff, lost media, monthly Q&As where you can ask me anything you like, and a lot more. For $5 a month, you get access to everything, including the full archive of previous uploads, and you can join or leave at any time. Seriously, to everyone who's already supported me over there, thank you so much. Your support truly makes a difference. If you want to join them, be sure to check out the Beta64 Patreon. The link is in the description. And now we get back to the development of Super Mario Galaxy 2. Now, before we can talk about Super Mario Galaxy 2, it's important to talk a bit about the first game first. If you've played both entries in the Galaxy series, you're probably already familiar with the differences between the two. Sure, they play fundamentally the same, but the vibe is different. The first game has this almost lonely feeling to it with a rich story and atmosphere, while the second game is bright and cheerful with only some basic story elements. Galaxy 2 is all about that fun, engaging gameplay over story, and that was a decision made by Miyamoto. See, while developing Super Mario Galaxy 1, Miyamoto couldn't help but wonder, was the story being added in really necessary for a Mario game? To him, Mario was all about the play experience. They're bright, active, and they drop you right into the action for you to start jumping around and doing wild moves. So having the player sit down and listen to backstories and complex settings, to Miyamoto, that weighed down the experience. Oh, and I should say that his feelings on this topic have been a thing for a while now. Whether or not to add story to a Mario game has been a hot topic ever since Super Mario Sunshine, which not only had a storyline, but full voice acting as well. But while Miyamoto didn't feel that story was necessary, on the other side, there was Yoshiaki Koizumi. He was the director of Super Mario Sunshine and Galaxy 1, and is a very good storyteller. To give an example, Koizumi actually wrote the entire story of Link's Awakening. Some would say this game is one of the best stories in the Zelda series, and while Miyamoto agreed that stories like that made sense for Zelda, he didn't feel the same about Mario. This was a difficult situation. This wasn't a battle between what was right and what was wrong, it was just two different styles of making games. But the problem was that they never really talked to each other about their different opinions, even though they had worked together for years. Because of this lack of communication, while they were both working on Super Mario Galaxy 1, Koizumi added a lot of story elements without Miyamoto's knowledge. He'd even sneak behind Miyamoto's back to add more story to the game because he knew Miyamoto would disagree if he found out. This was only possible because cutscenes and dialogue, they weren't added in until very late in development. So there was no time for Miyamoto to object and request changes. And so, development ended for Super Mario Galaxy 1 with its strong storyline intact, much to Miyamoto's dismay. In fall of 2007, the development of Super Mario Galaxy 1 came to a close. And immediately after that, Miyamoto suggested to the team that they make another Galaxy game. Wouldn't it be a terrible shame to never use the game's engine again after going to so much trouble making it? Well, that's what Miyamoto thought. He figured that they already had a great foundation to make another game in the Galaxy series. But the rest of the development team, they didn't particularly like that idea. I mean, think about it from the team's point of view. They had just finished this massive project making Galaxy 1, and they felt they had already done a good job of including almost every idea that they had back then. Was there really a need for a second one? As the director of the previous game, Koizumi figured it was his duty to try and encourage the team to come up with new ideas for a new game. So he requested that the whole team get back together to reflect on Galaxy's development. Koizumi took the role as listener, writing notes on what everyone had to say during the meeting. The team began talking about things they enjoyed from the game, and eventually led them to saying things like, "Yeah, I guess it would have been better if we had changed this part," and "I remember thinking of adding this to the game. It's a shame we didn't have time to do it." Everything was going according to Koizumi's plan. He wrote down all the responses from the team and presented his findings to Miyamoto. And that is when an idea struck Miyamoto. Why don't we make Super Mario Galaxy 1.5? The idea was simple. We make a new game that reuses all of the galaxies and planets from the first game. But for a twist, we add in new elements and make it a new experience, while also moving stars around and adding brand new ones to existing levels. The title was specifically chosen to be Galaxy 1.5 and not 2, because he didn't want the team to get too carried away. This was only meant to act as an expansion pack of sorts, since all the environments and even the music was planned to just be copied and pasted into the new game. Now, Super Mario Galaxy 1.5 wasn't the only name for this project. Sure, this was the intended public-facing name, but the development team had their own special name for the project too. More Super Mario Galaxy. This was the team's motto throughout this early stage of development, to just make more Mario Galaxy. And it was specifically made by Takeshi Hayakawa, the game's programming director. And fun fact, inside the files of the final game, we can see that the internal name of Galaxy 2 really is called Super Mario Galaxy More. But what did the team think about more Super Mario Galaxy? Well, it was certainly an interesting idea. They hadn't really done it before in a 3D Mario game, and Hayakawa personally liked the idea a lot. He liked the idea of not starting all over from scratch, so that way they could really refine the gameplay and add in lots of quality content. But others on the team, like Kento Motokura and Koichi Hayashida, they didn't particularly like the idea. Sure, it would allow them to add in lots of new ideas, but the problem was that they didn't have any new ideas. Hayakawa noticed that the team just was not excited about Galaxy 1.5. So to help, he tried to be a positive force to help lift up their spirits. It was obvious that the sticking point was that the team did not feel like there were enough ideas to put into a brand new game. So that meant all he had to do was convince them that there were new ideas to add in. He decided to get that train rolling by bringing one scrapped idea from the first game to their attention. It was one that everyone on the team agreed would have been a fun addition to the first game: Yoshi. Hayakawa pulled out these proposal documents that they had made during the development of Mario Galaxy 1. At the time, they had decided not to add in Yoshi because they already had a main focus for the game. Or another way that I could put it is that Mario Galaxy 1's main draw were the spherical planets. If they were going to add Yoshi in, they would want him to also be the main draw. And having a game with two main elements, that would just end up lessening both of them. But now with Mario Galaxy 1.5, they were in need of a main focus. Players were already used to all these spherical planets, so it would be the perfect opportunity to let Yoshi take the center stage. Okay, so if we're gonna have Yoshi in the game, they'll need to eat things. And I guess there's no better way than with the Wii Remote pointer. That's an easy enough addition. Oh, and they could pull objects with their tongue too. That would be fun. While the team was going through these Yoshi proposals, they also remembered another idea that they had scrapped from the first Galaxy game: Starship Mario. Well, it wasn't going to be a starship at first though. It was just going to be a simple planet for Mario to run around that just so happened to be shaped like his head. It was back during the development of Mario Galaxy 1 that Koizumi had proposed that idea, and everyone completely ignored this planet head idea. They were just so busy, and they just didn't pay attention. But now that the team had finally remembered what Koizumi had said, they decided that they should probably do it now. As you can tell, at this point, the gears were starting to turn. Ideas both old and new started being added to the project, and before you knew it, the team began thinking more positively and became excited to work on Super Mario Galaxy 1.5. Because on paper, this project was supposed to be much simpler than a full-blown sequel, Super Mario Galaxy 1.5 was expected to take only 1 single year of development time. But of course, as we know now, that wasn't even close. The team just kept coming up with more and more ideas, and of course, Miyamoto had his own ideas to add to the pile. Because Miyamoto was caught so off guard with the addition of story in Super Mario Galaxy 1, this time from Mario Galaxy 1.5, he decided to let the team know to not include a storyline. Instead, he wanted them to focus on something different: the sky. Early on in the development of Super Mario Galaxy 1.5, even before the team had decided to add in Yoshi, Miyamoto had already given them his big idea: that the game was going to feature a blue sky. The original Mario Galaxy had a much darker look to many environments, and Miyamoto felt that a bright, happy blue sky would be just a wonderful fit for Mario. Sure, flying through the cosmos is pretty cool, but it didn't have that specific Mario feel that he wanted for this new game. But because of this decision to change the sky, it was obvious that the music would need to be changed as well. The soundtrack needed to be more upbeat and fun, just to match that bright, happy sky. At least, that's what the sound team thought they should do. But they were worried that Miyamoto wouldn't agree. See, in Mario Galaxy 1, it was a bit of a controversial decision to use an orchestra to perform the soundtrack. And by controversial, I just mean that Miyamoto didn't really care for the idea. The sound team had had a hard time getting his approval back then. So for Galaxy 1.5, they figured that this was going to be another hard sell. I mean, they were going to have to tell him they wanted to make an entire new orchestrated soundtrack for just an expansion pack. And they immediately assumed that Miyamoto would tell them, don't do it, just reuse the original tracks. So the sound team decided that the best thing for them to do would be to make a presentation. So that way they could show him just how much value there would be in doing brand new orchestral recordings. It took them 2 whole days to make this presentation, and after finally gathering the courage, they approached Miyamoto and handed him what they had prepared. They timidly said, "Hey, we'd like to make another orchestral recording." To which Miyamoto replied, "Yeah, sure, why not?" The sound team was shocked. But in Miyamoto's eyes, since they had already done an orchestral soundtrack in the last game, players would be looking forward to that same level of quality in Galaxy 1.5. So the team took back their presentation materials and got back to their stations to get to work. A bright blue sky wasn't the only request Miyamoto had for this new Galaxy game. No, he had plenty more ideas. And one of these ideas was to include more 2D sections in the game. Miyamoto was intrigued by the idea of having 2D side-scrolling Mario games with depth. And speaking of depth, one of the other ideas that Miyamoto wanted to definitely see included in Galaxy 1.5 was the addition of more deep holes. Ever since Mario Galaxy 1, Miyamoto had been fascinated by the idea of Mario using holes to quickly get to the other side of a planet. And that was the entire idea. That was all the info that he gave the team. It was up to them to figure out how to make that idea fun. So the team got to work, expanding on the concept, and came up with an interesting idea: giving Mario a drill power-up, so that way the player could make their own holes practically anywhere and drill to the other side of a planet. But that by itself wasn't necessarily fun. It took them another couple months to come up with interesting gameplay elements to go alongside it. For instance, these tall pillars in the final game, you can't jump on them, so you have to go to the other side of the planet and drill through to get up there. But even though they all agreed that this was a fun idea, there was still a debate between the designers. As I said before, this was planned to be a new drill power-up that would transform Mario, much like the Fire Flower. But the designers thought the idea of a drill Mario was really weird. So instead, they decided to make the drill an item that Mario picks up, rather than a power-up that he transforms into. But it's so funny, because over a decade later, Drill Mario did end up being made for Super Mario Bros. Wonder, transforming Mario when he picks up the Drill Mushroom. Sure, it was still weird, but Mario Wonder's all about being weird, so it just made sense. Oh, and by the way, I made a video all about the development of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. In it, I showcase multiple early builds of the game, as well as a bunch of scrapped wonder effects. Feel free to give that video a watch after this one. The link is in the description, and it's on the end card too. Now, back to Mario Galaxy 1.5. At this point in development, the sound team was preparing an orchestra to do some preliminary recording sessions, and everyone on the development team wanted to watch them perform. After asking the higher-ups if it was okay, they brought every single person on the development team to watch the orchestra play. And even though the orchestra was a bit awkward at first trying to perform, it was still a very moving experience. They could see the musicians working hard to improve their performance, and the music that they were making together was absolutely beautiful. This filled the entire development team with determination. They wanted to make this new game the best it could be, filled with new ideas, refined platforming, high-quality visuals, and all that to match the beautiful music. The brainstorming sessions, which at first were quiet and low energy, had now exploded with so many new ideas that the team would end up going overtime and have to force themselves to stop the meetings. And even though these meetings were optional, everyone got involved, from the planners to the designers to the programmers. The team was inspired, and admittedly, they ended up getting a bit carried away. They had so many fresh ideas written down that this new game barely even resembled the first one. It was clear they had to go bigger. This couldn't just be Super Mario Galaxy 1.5. They were gonna start from scratch and make a full-blown sequel, now called Super Mario Galaxy 2. From no ideas to so many ideas that they had to make a sequel, what a turn of events. Now that they had this boatload of ideas from practically everyone on the team, Hayakawa decided to use this opportunity to the team's advantage. He decided to make a new development tool that would allow any staff member, regardless of role, to make their own stages, without having to wait for a programmer to implement their idea. With this tool, you could make landforms, put in enemies and objects, and quickly test it all out. And since it was so easy to use, even people on the sound team with no level design experience were able to make their own stages, and many of them were included in the final game. Here's an example of that. You remember Sand Slide Planet in Slip Sand Galaxy? The one with all the columns that roll towards you as you try to escape? Well, that was made by a designer who joined partway through the development of Galaxy 2. They had only been working as part of the team for a single week before using that tool to make a prototype of this planet. Now, of course, having a tool like this, which allows anyone to make prototype stages, is very cool. But it also means that it's more important than ever that all members of the team are on the same page. After all, they wanted this game to be a cohesive project, not just a bunch of random stages loosely connected. The team wanted to have a unifying concept to bring everything together. For Mario Galaxy 1.5, that concept was more. But since this was Super Mario Galaxy 2, a full-fledged sequel, the team decided to instead focus on the concept of switching. Sounds cool, but what does switching mean? To put it simply, the idea was that if a player does something, like push a button, the world should suddenly change in a dramatic way. A nice benefit of going for this dramatic concept would be that it would solidify Galaxy 2 as a new game, and not just Mario Galaxy again. The team felt it would be akin to what Nintendo did with Majora's Mask, which was another project that was made on top of a previous game's engine, specifically Ocarina of Time. In Majora's Mask, to differentiate it from its predecessor, the team created a 3-day system that would reset the game world. This made everything feel so different from Ocarina of Time, and the players would have to see it as a brand new Zelda title. So, with this idea of switching the world of Galaxy in dramatic ways, they hoped to accomplish the same thing that Majora's Mask did. But it was a problem. This switching idea was really hard to pull off. I mean, changing the entire world on the fly is a tall order, especially for a 3D Mario game. It just didn't come together, and they soon realized that they would have to give up on the idea. That meant Koizumi had to get back to work thinking of another, easier idea to use as the new core concept. And eventually, he came up with another brilliant idea. Let's do nothing. What if we just didn't have a core concept to bring it all together?
Koizumi knew from previous games he worked on that creating a new core concept at this point in development meant they would have to scrap a ton of ideas that they already had to make sure it all felt cohesive. But there were so many interesting ideas, it'd be such a shame to throw so many of them away. So he went to Hayashida to tell him his new plan, that they should just give up. Don't bother creating something cohesive, and instead focus on making the game interesting and fun. Now, that's not to say that everything related to the switching concept was scrapped. For instance, in Cosmic Cove Galaxy, you press this one switch and the whole area dramatically changes from an undersea world to a frozen ball of ice that you can now walk on. It's a small leftover of that bigger switching idea. It wasn't until Super Mario Bros. Wonder that this idea of dramatic changes was fully implemented in a Mario game. When a player collects a Wonder Flower, all these weird and wild wonder effects completely switch the world around you and turn the gameplay on its head too.
After scrapping the idea of switching in Mario Galaxy 2, the team decided to focus on their next order of business, giving Mario a variety of new power-ups. We talked about the drill already, so I say we talk about some of the other power-ups that Mario can acquire in the game, starting with the Cloud.
Cloud Mario. I would say this new power-up is probably the most iconic in Galaxy 2, and it was a pain to make. The idea came about during a specific experiment the team was doing, where they gave Mario the ability to create platforms just by swinging the Wii Remote. These platforms eventually became clouds, and that in turn created Cloud Mario. But giving the player the ability to make unlimited platforms wherever they want, that was gonna be way too powerful. So they decided to limit the power-up to just 3 clouds at a time. Still, even with 3 clouds, the player could get way higher than normal, which ended up being a constant issue that the team had to work around when designing the game's galaxies. And speaking of design, there were a lot of different designs for Cloud Mario's outfit. Before settling on the red and white color scheme, blue was another possible option as seen in this concept art. The designers were also considering a polka dot Cloud Mario and a Demon Mario. And I'm not making that name up, it literally says Demon Mario right here. It's obviously based on Oni from Japanese folklore. That's also where Nintendo got the idea for Demon Kawashima in Brain Age Devilish Training. But the team, they didn't end up going for this idea, and instead went for a cute, puffy Cloud Mario. Now the next new power-up in the game is Rock Mario, which from this concept art, we can see that his outfit was originally brown instead of gray. The idea for this power-up also came from an early experiment, where they had Mario rolling around after shaking the Wii Remote. Because it was so fun to do, they decided to make it a power-up by turning Mario into a rock that can roll around. And after seeing this new Rock Mario, Koizumi noticed something. This is a lot like Goron Link from Majora's Mask, who can also roll around. Turns out Koizumi was in charge of making the controls for Goron Link back on the Nintendo 64, so he gave the team lots of notes on how Rock Mario should be controlled. And the last brand new power-up in Super Mario Galaxy 2 that we'll talk about is of course Bone Mario. Wait, you don't remember Bone Mario? Oh, that's right, it never made it into the final game. Bone Mario was a planned power-up that ended up getting scrapped. The reason behind this is supposedly because of Miyamoto. According to Kotaku, Miyamoto personally didn't like Bone Mario. But that might not be the full story. Because according to an Iwata ass, Hayashida claims that after creating the drill in Cloud Mario, Miyamoto told the team that there were already enough power-ups being added to the game and they didn't even really need another one. Okay, but what was Bone Mario? Well, it turns out we actually have a lot of information about this scrap transformation, because parts of it are still left over in the game's files, under the internal name Horror Mario. Here's how it works. First, the game will check if a galaxy is in horror mode, likely from a prankster comment. It never will be, of course, but if you force the game to think it's in horror mode, something happens. The game crashes because it tries to load a model from Mario that no longer exists. But if you force it to load the Bone Mario model, which is used whenever Mario gets electrocuted in the final version, the game will give Mario his unused horror state. Now, to be clear, this Bone Mario model is not a perfect fit for the unused horror animations. You can see some weirdness going on with the bones, but it's closer than any other model that we have available. Anyway, with Mario now in this unused horror state, he can no longer be damaged. Instead, he'll break apart, sit around for a bit, and then he's back in action. And if you're tired of waiting for him to reform, you can mash the A button during this broken phase, and it'll speed it up a bit. Oh, and one other interesting feature of this state is that if you walk into light, Mario's player model will swap to his normal one. But when you leave the light, he'll turn back into bones. So what was the point of Horror Mario? Well, thanks to some unused texts that were meant for signboards, we can get a better idea of what this state was for. They're all in Japanese, of course, so I went ahead and translated them all into English. The first signboard text comes from Kinoko Tower Horror Zone, and it says, "Because of the bones curse, your life is nearly over. If you collect coins, you might live a little longer." But that's not all. There's also some unused text from Sea Mud Planet Horror Zone, and it says this: "If you enter the light, you can return to your original form. Your remaining lifespan will also be restored." Alright, let's take all these clues and put together a realistic theory on how this horror would have worked. First, there was likely a prankster comment that would turn you into Bone Mario at the beginning of the stage. That's when your life would start slowly draining away. Now, while you wouldn't get damaged directly from enemies, hitting them would still cause Mario to break apart, and that would slow you down, causing more life to drain away while you just sit there. Collecting a coin would restore a bit of your health, and stepping into light sources would act as a checkpoint by restoring your life and stopping it from continuing to drain, at least until you stepped out from the light. Collect the star at the end before your life drains away completely, and you win. Of course, most of this functionality, it isn't here anymore. All we have left over in the game is just Mario not getting hurt and switching back and forth between alive and dead. But it is all very spooky, isn't it?
Now that was quite a tangent about Bone Mario, so I say we go back to talking about Miyamoto. As development was progressing on Mario Galaxy 2, he began to notice something all too familiar. The team was again adding story without telling him.
It was happening again. Miyamoto was so focused on the action elements and course designs that he didn't notice the story elements seeping in. He had talked with Koizumi before development started to ease back on story elements, but it was still happening. What kind of story elements was the team thinking of adding in? Well, they proposed adding in characters from other Nintendo games, like Donkey Kong and Pikmin, which Miyamoto was not a fan of. There was no functional reason to add in those characters. Pikmin were too skinny, and Mario characters need to be big and plump so they're easier to stomp on. The team was told to focus on the functionality of the game first and foremost, but it just didn't seem like the message of less story was getting across. So Miyamoto called in Takashi Tezuka and Toshihiko Nakago, both of whom had been working on Mario since the very beginning. He wanted to see what they thought and let them play an in-development build of Mario Galaxy 2, and they both told Miyamoto that something felt wrong. With this validation that it wasn't just him, Miyamoto met with Koizumi on a Saturday afternoon outside the office. They talked together for over 4 hours straight, going back and forth presenting their points of view on the subject of stories in video games. And after all that, they came to an agreement about how to make Galaxy 2. Now, the conclusion wasn't just do it Miyamoto's way. No, Miyamoto actually had a change of heart after this talk with Koizumi. Before, Miyamoto thought that there was just no need for Mario to have a story at all. But now he realized that it wasn't so cut and dry. Really, the thing that's most important is to create a world that resonates with players of all ages. If there needed to be a story and cutscenes to make the world make sense and resonate with the player, so be it. But sometimes explaining the lore too much begins to make you feel like an outsider, being told the story rather than experiencing it yourself. There needed to be a balance between story and not explaining too much so you feel like you just don't belong in the world. Koizumi also came away from this conversation with an epiphany. He wanted to design Mario games with the objective being to tell a good story. But for Galaxy 2, he decided to try changing his mindset. That meant he would focus on making the game like a tool, giving the player access to tons of different moves that could all be strung together to perform amazing feats. It was going to be about smooth, fun gameplay first and foremost, and any story could be layered in subtly after the fact. So yeah, at the end of the day, they did trim out a lot of story elements from Galaxy 2, instead focusing on gameplay and controls. But they did make sure to create lots of new enemies and characters for the different galaxies, so each felt like it had its own ecosystem and untold backstory. After changing this focus, Tezuka played the game again and found it to be much more enjoyable to him. The tempo of the game had improved because it felt like the excess had been trimmed away, getting you right into what made Mario games so fun, the gameplay.
Speaking of things being trimmed from Super Mario Galaxy 2, the team also removed the mandatory tutorials from the game, seeing as they figured most people buying Galaxy 2 had probably already played Galaxy 1. Instead of forcing the player to go over what they already know, they decided to create something called the Tip Network. These signs allowed players to watch the developers complete difficult parts of levels, and most importantly, they were all optional.
Another optional thing that the team decided to include with the game was a tutorial DVD. Yeah, in Japan, Europe, and Australia, you got a physical DVD included with Mario Galaxy 2 to show you basic and expert techniques. And when I say basic, I mean basic. It has a tutorial on how to move. This whole thing was actually Iwata's idea. See, the team had been feeling very anxious about their decision to not include tutorials in the game. They felt this way until the very end of development. After all, they were making Galaxy 2 harder than the first one, specifically because players overseas found the original Super Mario Galaxy too easy. But because of that decision, the team was constantly warring between making sure the game was something that anyone could play, while also giving players more of a challenge since they're already used to the first game. Sure, they added in an expanded co-op mode with lots of new features so a family member could help out, but was it gonna be enough? Of all the team members though, Miyamoto was the one most worried about all this. So much so that Iwata wanted to help ease his mind, and came up with the idea to give out a DVD with every copy that went as detailed as humanly possible on how to play the game. No topic was too small, no stone left unturned. This helped Miyamoto feel more comfortable about their decisions while developing the game, and it was all thanks to a very kind suggestion meant to help out a stressed friend.
After working on the game for roughly 2 years, it was finally time for the team to show off their sequel to the world. Super Mario Galaxy 2 was first revealed at E3 2009, and development of the game was very far along at that point. At least that's what Miyamoto said during his roundtable on June 2nd. But instead of trying to quickly finalize the game for a 2009 release, Nintendo decided to quietly delay it until 2010, so that way it wouldn't conflict with the release of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. But that's okay, because there's still plenty of Galaxy 2 to see at the show. And I say we start with the screenshots that Nintendo sent to the press at E3.
First up is the iconic Starship Mario, except it doesn't look that much like a starship here. There are no facilities, no Lumas, it's just dirt and grass. Much more realistic dirt and grass at that. The nose also features a 1-up mushroom instead of a Yoshi egg. And speaking of 1-up mushroom, the next screenshot we have is of Supermassive Galaxy, which features a giant 1-up that is not in the final game. In fact, this entire area is not in the final game. The only reason we know it's Supermassive Galaxy is just because everything's so big. But there's no direct comparison that we can make since this location ended up being completely removed. But with this next screenshot of Hytale Falls Galaxy, we can make a direct comparison and see just how different everything is colored. It used to feature all sorts of blues, greens, and browns, but ended up becoming almost entirely wood grain in the final game. Also notice that the bridge is missing in the early screenshot, so I guess you were originally required to stomp on that Paragoomba in order to make it across. It's kind of a tall order this early into the game. Maybe that's why they decided to add a bridge later on. But those were just the screenshots. How about we check out Super Mario Galaxy 2's E3 2009 trailer? We get to see a ton of galaxies here. But before we take a look at them, listen to the music. It's like a MIDI version of Sky Station Galaxy's theme, at least at first. Towards the end of the trailer, it actually switches gears and begins to sound more like Gusty Garden Galaxy from the first game. Alright, I say we dive on in and check out this trailer because there is a lot to see. It all starts by showing off some B-roll of places that we can't find in the final version, like this rock planet that Mario flies on past. There's also this water planet that kinda resembles Water Across Sphere Planet from Fluffy Bluff Galaxy, only a lot smaller. And then there's this slider section that could technically be an early version of the slide in Tall Trunk Galaxy, except that it doesn't have any trunks. But how about we check out a part of this trailer that's a bit more familiar? Yoshi! They're found in an early Yoshi Star Galaxy. At least that's what people say online, but I'm not sure I fully believe it. Sure, Yoshi's here, but there's nothing around him that looks anything like Yoshi Star Galaxy, especially with that realistic grass. It's not just the grass, of course, the whole place feels off. It's got this test room vibe to it. There are no enemies, no NPCs, and the items around here are in very odd positions. Why is there a crate on this rock? And why is there this blimp fruit over here? You could easily reach the top of that platform without using it. And the only thing up there are just some star bits and a normal fruit, which would just give you even more star bits. Oh, and while we're looking at this area, that is one early blimp fruit. It's just a generic blue orb instead of a slightly more detailed fruit. And that normal fruit up there is also different, resembling a peach more than an apple like its final counterpart. And speaking of that specific fruit, it shows up in another section of the footage too. This is of Tower Planet, and it shows Yoshi eating both the early fruit and the prickly plant. The latter of which, it's very interesting, because in the final game you have to pull on the plant a bit to remove it, but it happens instantly in the E3 trailer. Hightail Falls Galaxy, which we saw in that screenshot earlier, also gives us a glimpse of another early food for Yoshi, the Dash Pepper. Except it doesn't look like a pepper at all. Again, just like all the other fruits, this one also looks like a generic apple, but it does function the same as the final version.
Okay, we've seen screenshots, strange planets that didn't make it in the final version, Yoshi and the early fruit that he ate, but we've only just scratched the surface of the E3 2009 trailer. So let's get back to it and take a look at Cloudy Court Galaxy, which changed a lot.
Alright, this is an early Cloudy Court Galaxy. Specifically, it's an early Castle Wall planet, but you'll notice it doesn't look very much alike, does it? Are we sure that's the same place? Well, the reason we know that it is Castle Wall Planet is just because it has castle walls. If it wasn't for that, we'd have no idea where this is because it looks nothing like the final version. Let's take stock of what we got here. It's a 3D platforming segment where you ride Yoshi and use their tongue to swing between flowers. In the final game, it's a 2D segment where you use clouds and fans to reach the goal, and Yoshi is nowhere to be seen. In fact, Yoshi is never in this galaxy in the final game. Later on in the trailer, we get to see some more parts of Cloudy Court Galaxy 2. So let's start from the beginning with the starting planets. Here, things look kind of familiar, but also very different. For starters, there are no cloud power-ups here. There are clouds, but you would have had to jump between them with a powerless Mario onto these early mushroom-shaped platforms. Next, we'll reach the drums, which used to be an orangey red instead of purple, and the cymbals used to have a checker pattern on them. But this launch star, where'd that go? Maybe would have appeared when you ground pounded the cymbal, instead of just being there like in the final game. And lastly, for Cloudy Court Galaxy, we have the Ruined Tower planets, which changed in a number of ways. The early version used a different texture for the grass that has a bunch of circles, and it also had some bushes over there too. But of course, the biggest change here are with the towers themselves. They look completely different cosmetically. Oh, and there are a couple of other missing things too, like the windmill in the back and the Octumba near the star. How about we head on over to Spin Dig Galaxy now to see Miyamoto's cool new drill item in action. Compared to Cloudy Court Galaxy, there aren't going to be as many differences here. For example, in the final game, this drill item is in a crater, but in the E3 trailer, it's just sitting around in a random place. Not a super big change, but there is something much more interesting further on. See, in the final game's mission, Silver Stars Down Deep, your goal is to collect silver stars underground to collect the Power Star. But that is not how it was originally going to go. Looking at the trailer, you would have originally collected star chips. And if you played either Galaxy or Galaxy 2, you know that once you collect all the star chips, you're rewarded with a launch star that would take you to another planet. But in the final version of Spin Dig Galaxy, there are no more planets to visit. This square one is all we have. So that means originally, there was going to be a lot more to this mission than what we eventually got. Our next galaxy to look at is Puzzle Plank Galaxy, and from the very beginning we can see a lot of changes. First off, the colors are different on everything from the wood to the ground pound marker, and there's also a whittle here, which is interesting because they don't appear in this galaxy at all in the final game. And speaking of whittles, once you ground pound on this platform and get sent down below, you'll come across even more of them. Other changes down here include the ground pound switches originally being tree stumps, along with wooden guardrails that were replaced with metal ones. Further along in this galaxy, you'll come across, you guessed it, more removed whittles. But that's not all that changed here, because again, all the wooden platforms and ground pound markers changed colors after E3. Not to mention the tree trunks are much wider in the final game, likely to make it easier to ground pound, and the question coin here, that was not present in the trailer. Okay, we're just about done with this mission puzzling picture block, but before we can move on and grab the Power Star, we have to put Mario in this precarious position with grinders all around destroying the planet. Here you'll notice that the comet medal was originally just a 1-up mushroom, which could mean that the idea of collecting medals to make comets appear had been implemented at this point. And after Mario survives this whole ordeal, he's presented with a launch star to get out of there. Though this was later changed to a sling star in the final game. And that's it for the puzzling picture block mission, but the trailer shows off one more area of Puzzle Plank Galaxy, the Shadow Vault, where Mario needs to collect a bunch of purple coins while being chased by his cosmic clones. The difference here is that the color of the vault was originally a dark, foreboding gray, instead of the warmer brown color they chose later on.
Alright, let's get away from all the dark grays and the warm colors and head over to somewhere cooler. The snowy hills of Freezy Flake Galaxy. There we can see even more changes from the E3 2009 trailer.
This version of Freezy Flake Galaxy is a bit of an odd one, because while the final version has a lot of stuff around Snowdoll Koopa Planet, the early E3 version is practically empty. Now it does still have the giant Bowser sculpture though, just without the surrounding trees. Despite it lacking so much on this planet, the trailer does show us that the boss battle with Sir Betty was already here and completely functional. Originally though, there were crystals scattered around the planet, and those were later replaced with piles of snow instead. Keeping with that frozen theme, next up is Cosmic Cove Galaxy. This is where that concept of switching survived from early in development, thanks to this ground pound switch that freezes the entire planet. But this stone structure where the switch was originally going to be, this trailer shows it sitting on a random floating platform instead. And though it functions the same as usual, the cutscene telling you what happened in the final game isn't here in the E3 build, though it is possible that they just removed it from the trailer, since we already know from earlier with the whittles that text boxes are not visible right now, even when Mario is talking to NPCs. Alright, you know I love the darkness, let's head on back in and visit Boo Moon Galaxy, specifically the Ghost Maze Planet. In the final game, it's got this fun vibe with the textures. There's stars and green tiled walls to make things feel like a fun house. But the E3 version shows us a slightly spookier take, with dark brick walls and a dirt floor with these yellow bits thrown around. Okay, next up is the beautiful, blooming garden planet in Supermassive Galaxy. This early version starts out as a dirt planet with Goombas running around, and as you circle it, flowers begin to bloom. It functions the same way in the final game, but instead of starting out with dirt, it's a grass planet, and there are no Goombas to worry about either, so you're free to run around with no fear of bumping into anything. And speaking of flowers, we've now reached Honey Hop Galaxy, which normally has a bunch of grass and flowers all around, but this trailer shows off a section that looks nothing like that. It's got this cave spelunking aesthetic and these weird futuristic lamps lighting up your way. It doesn't look pretty much anything like the final game, but there is a section that does look a bit closer to it. It's this part here, which features a waterfall that was made less prominent later on. One of the big things you'll notice in this is that the bee mushroom is being kept inside a crystal, but that power-up is never kept in one in the final game. Instead, it just sits around waiting for you to pick it up. From nature and flowers to cold steel, this is Space Storm Galaxy, specifically Top Man's Tower, and there is a lot to compare in this one section alone. First, just like everywhere else, wood grain is a different color. There were white lines on them instead of green, there was no green pipe available to use in this early build, and the moving platforms look different. Plus, there's no electric rail on the bottom right, and that lava was originally just water, so it would have been safe to fall into. Oh, and you can't forget about the skybox, it is vastly different. The E3 trailer's reusing the same one from Good Egg Galaxy and Mario Galaxy 1, while the final version uses this dark, rainy background with rain falling down as you try to ascend the tower. Of course, the entire point of this mission is to use the ground pound switches to slow the flow of time and make things easier to platform. But it's interesting because this early build did not use ground pound switches. It used a rotary switch that you would spin into to slow down time. And keeping with this topic of metal and steel, we've got an interesting planet here that may have been part of Battle Belt Galaxy. In the final game, this galaxy is all about going through a bunch of small planets to defeat enemies, and one of those planets has a bunch of homing chomps. Well, the assumption is that this planet from E3 is an early version of that one, but instead of being a bunch of normal homing chomps, there would have been just one giant one. Oh, and there's something else about this too. There are no giant homing chomps in the final game. This enemy ended up getting scrapped, though references to it exist unused in the file system of Galaxy 2. It was likely going to be called Wan Wan Search Big internally, but with no models or sound effects left over, there's no way to know for certain that this is the exact one it's referencing. Speaking of giants, let's take another look at Supermassive Galaxy, though it's gonna be hard to compare since this specific area is nowhere in the retail build. It features giant pipes and coins that aren't quite as big as the ones in the final game, along with a giant block that actually moves, something that doesn't happen anywhere in the finished galaxy. Alright, next we travel to Flip Swap Galaxy. While the panels do look the same as the final version, the little safety area further along shows us that they were originally going to be made up of used blocks, instead of these nice ones with diamonds on them. On top of them, the Crystal and Octumba, nowhere to be seen at E3, instead they were just 3 regular Goombas. And last but certainly nowhere near least, we've got Sky Station Galaxy, and we're going to start with Skyfleet Ship Planet, which has a different red color scheme from most of the planet, except for the cannons, which were gray. And ironically, later those became red, and everything else turned gray. Oh, and inside the glass structure are a bunch of electric rails that later became amps. The next planet we'll look at is a part of Sky Station Galaxy as well, even if it doesn't really look like it. This section with 3 twirl-ups was completely removed from the final game, and the only reason we know it's a part of Sky Station Galaxy is because of the camo walls, which have the same camo pattern as seen on Grass Fleet Planet later in the trailer. If we compare this planet to the final game, you'll see a big difference right away: the camera angle. Normally the camera would be locked at this specific angle, but not so in the trailer. Here it's got that same cinematic camera from the planet we saw earlier. And it's thanks to this different camera angle that we're able to see a lot more changes. First, as I said, the wall here is camo, instead of it being made of wood panels. This wall also has only 1 cannon on it, but the final game has 3 in a row to worry about. But that is not all. This early version shows us a fundamental change to the planet that's easy to miss at first glance. See, in the final game, you run past the 3 cannons, defeat the enemy, grab the key, and lastly get the power star. But if you look closely at the trailer, you'll see some pole stars in the back that would have taken you up to the top of the wall. Unfortunately, we can't see what's actually up there, but what we can see is this Koopa Troopa under it. And that's actually a big deal. Believe it or not, in the retail build of Super Mario Galaxy 2, there are only 2 places where regular-sized Koopa Troopas show up, and they both appear in Cosmic Cove Galaxy. But here's the thing, they are also both green, and this Koopa Troopa in the trailer is red. Red Koopa Troopas don't appear anywhere in the final game, though they can be forced in by changing a Koopa Troopa's color parameter. ID 1 is for that red Koopa, and if you set it to 2, you'll end up with a brand new scrapped blue Koopa Troopa as well. While the red version did appear in Galaxy 1 and functions the same way here as well, the blue variety has never appeared in any Mario Galaxy game, and it's also only halfway finished. You can tell because after you stomp on it and pick up the shell, it'll just switch back to a green color. And with that, we have now reached the end of the trailer. The last bit it shows off is of Starship Mario, which we saw earlier in that screenshot, and then a nice zoomed out view of Cloudy Court Galaxy, with Mario riding Yoshi, which again, isn't possible in the final game. Then bam, the logo! And as you can probably tell, this is just the Mario Galaxy 1 logo with a 2 slapped on the bottom. Definitely a placeholder before we ended up with this beautiful final version.
So that was E3 2009. They certainly showed off a lot at the show, but there was still something missing. There was no demo for attendees to play. In fact, it wasn't until February 24th, 2010 that journalists could actually play a demo of Mario Galaxy 2. This was at Nintendo's Q1 2010 Media Summit, an event that Nintendo held from time to time to show off upcoming games. It was there that attendees could play the game for the first time. But I couldn't find any footage of it online. There are plenty of journalists talking about playing the game, but there is no demo footage to be found. But that doesn't mean we've got nothing to see. Nintendo also included a new trailer for the game that shows off another early build with plenty more changes to see.
It all begins with a brand new logo that looks identical to the final version, just without the co-star Luma over the two. And then bam, again, Mario is blasted off next to an erupting volcano. What a way to start our look at Yoshi's Star Galaxy. Okay, the first difference I want to mention is that there was way more pop-out in this early version of the game. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, game developers will remove objects that are far away from the player in order to save on resources. And it's clear in this trailer that it used to be a much more aggressive system. See all the stuff being removed from this area as Mario flies away? This doesn't happen at this point in the final game at all. Now let's look at this early and final builds side by side to check out even more changes, like how the teleporter's in a different position, or that there's a nest for Yoshi near the Smeeches, and there's also no crystals and star bits in them anywhere around. Other removed objects include the grass near the end of the platform, rocks on the dirt, and marks on the curved section of the terrain. There is an odd change here too. Do you see the volcano? It looks like they used to use a more detailed texture for it that ended up getting smoothed out in the final game. I wonder why. Well anyway, later on in the trailer we get to see our pal Yoshi hatch from his egg for the first time. The cutscene itself is just like the final game, however in the background we can see a few changes. The teleporter doesn't have the large glowing light yet, the mini Goomba was eventually replaced with an Octoomba, and the big fruit in the background is visible at this point in the trailer, but not at this point in the retail build. But it's interesting because after Yoshi comes back down, the fruit is visible now, even though we're at practically the same camera angle as before. Other than that, behind this hill, the Piranha Plant eventually became an Octoomba. And that's it for the starting planet. But, of course, there are even more differences to see further on at Marble Rock Planet, which used to be a lot smaller. Comparing the trailer to the final game, you can see that the area in the back was greatly expanded, with Lakitu and Spiny added in as well. And that twirl up on the top right, they were just completely removed. Oh, and that handle on the platform, it's green instead of red. Alright, that was a lot for one galaxy. Let's check out some other galaxies that don't have quite as many changes, like Spindig Galaxy, where the only difference is this Luma, who was removed for some reason.
And the small changes continue in Tall Trunk Galaxy,
with the grass being noticeably taller and thinner in the trailer, and there's also no light coming from the teleporter, just like in Yoshi's Star Galaxy. But if you want something that's more than just a cosmetic difference, check out Haunty Hall's Galaxy. While it looks almost identical to the final game, you'll notice in the background of the trailer that there's this entire area over here that was completely removed. Wonder where it would have led to, but we don't know. Okay, next up is Hightail Falls Galaxy, which now has the same wood grain look as the final game. But while this question coin is in both versions, the retail build gives you a bunch of coins while the trailer gives you star bits. And the exact opposite thing happens on the right side. While the final game has a line of star bits there, the early build has coins. Further into this galaxy, while things do look identical, there is a glaring difference right here: the addition of a black hole. This was likely added in so that way players have a greater feeling of danger while trying to cross the gap. Alright, there are only 2 galaxies left that I want to check out. The first is Clockwork Ruins Galaxy. On Rolling Drum Planet, you'll notice that the colors are slightly darker in the final game compared to the trailer, and later on you'll notice that the grass and wall textures were changed, and an Octumba was added right here just to give Mario a bit of trouble. And lastly, there is Upside Dizzy Galaxy. Here the level design was slightly altered, with that 1-up mushroom becoming a life mushroom, and a bunch of used blocks and some coins were added in too. However, that spring, it ended up getting removed. Oh, and I can't forget this part here. Not only do you notice the removal of an electric rail, but more importantly, here's an early version of the Comet Medal, which is missing the iconic Mario eyes in this early trailer.
Now you might be tempted to think that that's all we have to cover from Media Summit 2010, but no, Nintendo decided to send out some B-roll of the game to the press. This is not the same build of Super Mario Galaxy 2 from the trailer. No, it's actually a later build of the game that we should definitely take a look at.
So how do I know that this is a later build of the game? Well, you can tell from a few specific areas. For instance, that question coin in Hytale Falls Galaxy, it now gives out coins just like the final game. And in Tall Trunk Galaxy, even though the grass is still tall and thin, the teleporter now has its light beam. But thankfully, we're not just retreading the same ground in this B-roll. We can actually see completely new areas, and the returning ones will show off some new missions as well. For instance, here's Supermassive Galaxy. The last time we looked at the area, it was completely different from anywhere in the final game, but now it is a lot more similar, except for the fact that the movement of these platforms in the back, they ended up getting reversed between the trailer and the retail build. Oh, and fun fact, there's a strange visual glitch in the B-roll that shows the Piranha Plant's shadow on the outside of the pipe as it goes up and down. This was fixed eventually by just removing the shadow in the final version. We also get to see Yoshi's Star Galaxy again, but this time during the Spiny Control mission. Comparing this B-roll to the final game, you'll notice that this cage, which would normally hold the launch star, originally just held some star bits. The launch star was instead moved over here, just a short distance away. Further in, we can see a bit more of Marble Rock Planet too. That gives us some interesting insight into this planet's level design. See, originally the launch star that gets you out of here was contained in a big fruit just past this twirl up, but I guess the developers thought it was just too easy. They decided to put the launch star in a cage instead to make it a bit harder, and because of that, they needed you to have a spiny in order to break it. So instead of a twirl up, they decided to put a Lakitu in to help with that. However, in order to accommodate 2 new enemies, they would have to expand the planet to give the player more room to battle. That one thought of it being too easy just grabbing a fruit made this whole place require an entire redesign. That's game development for you.
Now that might have been all Nintendo had to show at Media Summit, but there was still one more thing for them to reveal: the release date of Super Mario Galaxy 2, which was set to be May 23rd, 2010 in North America. But before the game's release, Nintendo wanted to show off another trailer, the May 31st, 2010 trailer that showed off new additional things, including the rock mushroom.
Even though this trailer came out only a couple months before the game's release, there's still a few differences in this trailer that we can see. For instance, looking at the level select screen, you can see that the connecting lines to Tall Trunk Galaxy and Cloudy Court Galaxy are positioned differently, and I have no idea why they changed that. There's also another subtle difference in Freezy Flake Galaxy too. That tree right next to the Goomba structure, in the final game, it's not covered in snow. That's the difference. And it's funny though, because in the trailer, Mario uses fire on it, and it ends up making the tree look just like the final game. But if that wasn't cool enough, then how about we check out Sky Station Galaxy, where the cannons are orange instead of red. Alright, I'll level with you. As you can tell, this is pretty much just like the retail build of the game. But what if I told you that 11 years later, in September of 2021, Nintendo showed off more early images of Mario Galaxy 2? It's true, but there was a catch. This information was only meant to be shown to students during an online seminar, where Nintendo employees would show off what game development is really like by demonstrating projects they had worked on before. Well, even though we're not all students here, we luckily have someone who attended this seminar and took screenshots of it for us. That's where we got the design document for Yoshi that was shown earlier in this video. But we have more to see than just that. Here's concept art for Yoshi Star Galaxy showing off many of its planets. The tower planet doesn't have that giant cutout on the bottom, and the starting planet would have had Mario start the mission landing on a skull instead of a grassy area. And speaking of skulls, there was a planned dry bone skull planet shown here in the concept art. You would have reached it by climbing the fossil planet and taking this launch star here, but in the final game, they just scrapped the whole planet and decided to end the mission on the top of Fossil Planet. By the way, comparing this planet side by side with the concept art, you'll see that it was originally grassier with a lot less pits to fall through. But if concept art isn't your thing, how about an early in-development screenshot of the starting planet that was also shown at the seminar? Comparing it to the final game, the planet geometry looks very placeholdery. Lots of sharp edges and stretch textures along the ground, and it's also missing a lot of decorative features like the bones. The Yoshi egg doesn't appear to be under a force field yet either, and has a berry nearby that ended up getting removed. Some other things that got removed include these boxes and that brown hill over there. But the final game didn't just remove stuff, there was also some things that it added in, like the flowers, prickly plants, crystals, and of course, the giant fossil planet in the background here.
On May 23, 2010, Super Mario Galaxy 2 was released in North America, and in a few days, it also released in Japan, to critical acclaim, selling over 6 million copies worldwide in less than a year. And the rest is history. But we're far from done with our look at the development of Galaxy 2. See, throughout this video, I've been showing off some unused findings in the game, like the blue Koopa Troopas and Bone Mario, but now I say that we go more in depth and see what else goes unused in the files of Mario Galaxy 2.
I say we begin this section of the video looking at some unused text, starting with ones that were meant just for testing purposes. How do I know they're just for testing? Well, it's because the file the text is in is called Takezawa Test A. Because of the name, it's assumed it was all written by Yuya Takezawa, who had the role of sound programmer and effects in Galaxy 2. So what does it say in the file? Well, the text is for a couple of toads, with one saying test, 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 line break, and the other saying test, coin. Okay. Kiyoshi Takeuchi also had his own dedicated test file as well, with plenty of unused text in it too. He was one of the programmers of Galaxy 2, and in his file called Takeuchi NPC Test Zone, there's roughly 30 unused lines of dialogue. Allow me to give you some of the most interesting ones, like a toad saying, "This is the rumored Takeuchi test stage," or a Whittle saying, "I hate lumberjacks." There are a couple more I want to show you too, but these require a bit of an explanation. For example, there's some test dialogue for the chimp that says, "The Score Attack Association supports Mario Galaxy." But what on earth is a Score Attack Association? Well, it turns out the internal name for the chimp is Score Attack Man, or at least it was until later in development when it was changed to Play Attack Man. That means another way you could say this line is, "The Chimp Association supports Mario Galaxy." Still in that same test file, we've got some more unused dialogue, this time for Lubba, who's known internally as Maista. Here's that test text. "I'm Maista. My favorite food is beans. Also ham too." Keeping on this same topic of test dialogue, let's check out a different file with some lines for Toad. This is called Koopa Test, and here Toad says, "Hee! Bowser's chasing us! If he catches us, it's all over! That star, let's crash it into him to create some distance! Since it's you, Mario, of course you can do it! Right?" You did it, Mario! Of course I knew you could do it! You're Mario after all! Alright, let's go back to Peach's Castle. Now this is the perfect segue to talk about Peach's Castle. Turns out there's even more unused text about the castle, and based on what it says, it looks like you would have originally been able to walk around the inside of the place. During the intro of the game, when you're running and jumping around with our castle in the background, you were intended to actually go in. This was going to be called internally Peach Castle Inside Zone. In the final game, you're stopped right before you can get in by a Luma and a launch star. But unused in the file of Galaxy is some dialogue that the Luma and Toads would have said inside the castle. The Toads would have said things like, "Please save Princess Peach," and "Mister, these people seem to know the princess's whereabouts." In this context, these people refers to the Lumas. After that, one of the Lumas would say, "Our friends, the Power Stars, are being held captive by Bowser. Bowser is using that power to head towards the far reaches of space-time. Please, let's rescue the Power Stars together." Talk to the yellow Luma next, please. Yeah, that last part in parentheses, I'm not sure if they were gonna keep that in. But anyway, the Luma would then finish the conversation by saying, while nearby, "Shake the Wii remote." They're referring to another Luma that was supposed to be inside the castle too, that would say, "I'll send you flying into the cosmos. When you're nearby, shake the Wii remote, please." Essentially, all the stuff that happens in the final game on the bridge was originally planned to be on the inside of the castle. But why did they change that? Well, it might be because the castle has a ceiling. Possible they just moved it outside so that way Mario would have free reign to blast off into space. Though of course, that's all speculation.
That sure was a lot of interesting unused text, but how about I show you something that isn't just words on a screen? This is a super mushroom, and it goes unused in Mario Galaxy 2. But the interesting thing about it is that it was also in Mario Galaxy 1, where it also went unused. This thing was in both games, but was never used once. And despite that, if you remove it from the game, it will crash.
Speaking of leftovers from the first game, Super Mario Galaxy 2 has references to the Ice Flower and the Red Stars Flying Mario in its files, with the most interesting reference being the music tracks. Yeah, the songs for each power-up are still in the final game, but sound different than their Galaxy counterparts. For the Ice Flowers theme, it's almost exactly the same, kinda just sounds like a different mixing. But the theme for Flying Mario is completely different, using an entirely new instrument that wasn't in the original song. Does that mean they were planning on bringing those power-ups back for the second game, and it even started on remixing the music? It's possible, but the actual models are nowhere to be found, so it's likely they didn't get very far. There's even more interesting unused music in Galaxy 2. The bosses Gubblegut, Glamdozer, and Mega Hammer all have scrap music tracks that are intended to play whenever they entered an angry state. They're all similar to the music that plays in the final game, just much faster. Out of all the unused music, I think these next two are my favorites. You know how there are 6 main worlds in the final game and then 1 additional S-world? Well, it looks like there were 2 more worlds that were planned for the game, because inside the files of Galaxy 2, there are 9 world map themes, with the second and third ones going unused. Keep in mind that doesn't mean that these early tracks are for Worlds 2 and 3. No, these are 2 completely unseen worlds that would have been placed between World 1 and World 2 in the final game. But what about unused music that was planned for an actual galaxy? Well, we've got a couple of those too. Here's an early one for Tall Trunk Galaxy. That sounds very placeholdery. And how about this next one? This one is an unused musical theme that was planned for a galaxy that never appears in the retail build of the game. This is called SMG2 Galaxy 08 STRM. And in the game's files, it shows up after the theme for Cloudy Court Galaxy. And it even has optional Yoshi drums as well, meaning you could have row Yoshi in this Galaxy 2.
Honestly, some of these unused tracks are so well made. They're beautiful, and it's a shame that they never got added into the final game. But we're not done looking at unused things in Super Mario Galaxy 2. Now I say we start checking out some unused textures for various objects in the game.
The funny thing is, all the textures I want to look at with you are letters, like this X and O that were meant for the Chance Cube. Now obviously based on how simple they look, these were more likely placeholders than something that would have actually been in the game. But the same can't be said about this letter P. Sure, it also looks pretty simple, but it's not just any P. It's based on the power balloon from Super Mario World. You know, the one that blows up Mario. This texture was intended to go on the blimp fruit, which does the exact same thing to Yoshi in the final game. It was planned to just be a fun reference, but ended up getting scrapped. So now we've talked about text, music, and textures, but how about some more unused models and animations? Let's do it. Let's start with Staff Unbaba Home Planet Zone. This is a copy of Magma Planet from Melty Monster Galaxy, and was intended to be used during the end credits of the game. Ironically, there are no Magmas here, and the only thing you can do is just hop around with the fixed camera capturing the action. This is standard fare for all the other end credit planets you can jump around the final game, and I have no idea why this one in particular got cut out. Now for unused animations, I got a nice variety of them meant for various characters, like the Womp King. In the final game, this giant womp will jump up from behind the stage, but this unused animation shows that originally, they would have just been standing there waiting for you to show up. Then when you do appear, they just turn around. If you look closely at the arms, you can see that they don't really attach, so this animation probably wasn't even finished yet. Or maybe it was meant for a differently sized model for the Womp that's no longer here. Let's continue with this trend of royalty and look at this unused animation for King Lakitu. This one shows him being hit with his glasses flying off. Since there's no animation of him putting them back on, the assumption is that he would have permanently lost those glasses when entering his angry phase. In the final game, his glasses do kind of fall halfway off, so it's not a stretch to think that the original plan was for them to fall off completely. And the last unused thing that I want to show you in the files of Super Mario Galaxy are the Lumas. No, there aren't actually any unused Lumas, but the Lumas do have unused colors. The first is a nice pink color which was cut from Galaxy 2, but they do appear in the first game as Hungry Lumas. Now of course I know that Hungry Lumas are in Galaxy 2, but they don't appear in this smaller form. They only show up holding star bits or coins and that's it. In Galaxy 1, the smaller forms appear in the observatory after you finish feeding them, and then you can talk to them again to get them to transform into a launch star. Now, the second and last unused color is purple, and Lumas of this color don't appear in either Mario Galaxy game. Why? Well, if I had to make a guess, it's probably because they ended up reserving that specific color for other characters. In the first game, the Comet Luma is the one that has a purple color. Granted a bit darker, but it's pretty similar. And then of course, for Galaxy 2, we got Lubba. It seems like purple always ended up being reserved for special Lumas, so that way they would be unique and easy to spot as they lead you on a journey throughout the galaxy.
And that's the development of Super Mario Galaxy 2. There are so many people out there that absolutely love this game, focusing so much on the incredible gameplay. And that was no accident. It took a ton of hard work from everyone on the team to make this Mario Galaxy game feel special and unique. From the level design, to the controls, to the environments and the music, and so much more. The team's determination to make this established Mario Galaxy formula the best it could be is truly inspiring. And most of all, extremely fun to play.
Patreon supporters, again, thank you so much for supporting Beta64. You genuinely make a huge difference and keep this channel going. Be sure to click the link in the description and check out the Patreon yourself. And don't forget to watch some more Beta64. I've got a great episode on the development of Mario Wonder that you should definitely check out.